What up? It's Duke from the Intimacy Liberation Army, and I was out tonight. I had a bunch of conversations about anger and about frustration and trying to find resolution and get rid of resentment between partners. Um, I've been going out a lot recently with the goal of being super vulnerable, trying to um, create reciprocity with the people that I would run into. And I met three different guys tonight uh, that were having issues with their dating lives or whatever, which was interesting because they all hit me up. They're like, "Oh, I've seen your content on the Instagram, and you're doing good stuff, man. Here's my problem." And then it's like I haven't had this kind of reception to my professional life out in public in a long time, since I was doing like a lot of YouTube videos and started getting recognized like down in LA. And so it's kind of interesting that I'm being kind of looked at as that expert rather than this other guy at the bar, by the guys who are following me. I didn't even know some of these guys were following me. I was like, "Oh, you're saying this stuff? That's weird." But it was cool because I was able to get in some super deep, super vulnerable conversations with these guys and talk through some of their issues. And there's kind of a running theme tonight about anger and emotions and blame. And so I kind of wanted to discuss that a little bit and kind of what my thoughts were. So let's get into it. The first guy I talked to, he was talking about a recent breakup, and he obviously had some feelings about the breakup. There's still some betrayal, some loss, but he was talking through his frustrations of what would happen when his partner wouldn't communicate and or negotiate, right? And I got this from, I guess, Jordan Peterson primarily, but the idea that the most vital skill in your relationship management is going to be your ability to negotiate. We hear communication is key all the time. I've shot multiple videos on the importance of communication, the importance of being able to make things clear, the importance to find common ground, agree on things, and move forward from there. But I really think he summed it up nice when he was like, if you see the inability or unwillingness to negotiate through problems with respect, then you should leave the relationship and move on. You can look that up. There's a video on YouTube, something like, if you see this, run, or something like. So Jordan Peterson stuff. But like that concept alone, it's kind of simmered in my brain, where if somebody's unwilling to negotiate with you, someone's unwilling to come to the table with their grievances and their fears and be honest about it, and then you're unable to come to the table and be honest about it and feel safe in sharing that so that you guys can kind of hash through and negotiate on stuff, it's going to be very difficult for you to not build resentment against each other. It's super important to make sure that whoever your partner is or partners, that whatever level of relationship that you're at, you have the ability to come to the table and talk about hard shit. Come to the table and talk about things that are bothering you, things that make you feel. And obviously, there's healthy ways to fight, and there's ways that don't serve you. But in general, you want to be able to carry a level of respect for each other and avoid resenting or blaming. And so one of the things I was saying to this first guy was, it's very important that you understand that your power of what you're responsible for, you know, whether it's in a social situation or a moral situation or a hierarchy of comparison. You know, he was talking about having issues with comparing himself against, you know, other men that his girlfriend was looking at, and he was comparing himself in, you know, his professional life as well. Like he felt like other people were doing more than he was, and he was feeling less than. His self-esteem was dropping because the he didn't feel as capable as the people he was comparing himself with. And well, we can attack that from a comparison standpoint at some point. Um, what I felt like I needed to tell him was that the more responsibility that you assign to other people or you delegate to other people, the less you can use that power to actually change shit for yourself. Uh, Put it a different way is all of your behavior and all of your emotions are under your control. So you need to understand that your behavior and the things that you choose to act on are under your control. And I'm not going to hardcore like take responsibility for everything, but everything that you do, everything that you choose to do is under your control, and it's only when you give other people that power you delegate that stuff out, or you outsource the behavior and the things that you do to somebody else, and then hope that they do something well with it. That's when you lose the ability to do it for yourself. I'm kind of talking about this a little esoterically. So basically, let's say that you're, I don't want to give too much detail because these guys are humans, but let's say you're feeling a sense of betrayal and that you don't feel like you can operate because, you know, this person is doing this thing to you, you know, cheating on you or you know, speaking to you, you know, without respect, and makes you kind of feel like you can't control parts of your life. When you trust them with the ability to control how you react, like you say, I'm helpless, I just hope they do well with this thing, and you say, okay, the control and the responsibility that I have to manage my own emotions, to act in the ways that I know that I should or whatever, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to put that on your back and blame you for when you do fucked up shit, and then I have to react all, you know, hurt and betrayed or whatever. When you give them all of that power, then you can't use it for yourself. There's definitely a way to run away from personal responsibility by saying, "Oh, you know, I'm just like this, and I'm not choosing to give this person this power, and I put up a bunch of walls." That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when you're frustrated by someone else and their behaviors towards you, and you're not holding your own boundaries, then you don't have the power to manage your emotional state anymore. You're saying like, look, she has all of this control over me because I just lose it, or I go into a rage or whatever when she, you know, doesn't respect me, and then she won't listen and she won't negotiate, and you're blaming all of this stuff on your partner. You can't stop the gap, right? Like you can't make it so that you get what you want in your own personal emotional space, because you're already giving it all to her to to do what she will with it. And a lot of people are unqualified, like they can't properly control your emotions. So why are you giving them control of those emotions? Because like they're not qualified to deal with it, right? It's kind of a loose boundaries type situation. There's there's a whole host of things that you can do between, you know, communicating and negotiating to leaving the relationship or whatever. Like there's a whole number of things in the meantime. But what happens is if you give your power away and you say, look, I'm going to trust you with this part of my emotional things. Please do something right with it. And then they do something wrong with it. And then you're like, well, I gave it to you and you fucked it up, so it's your fault. And that means I can kind of be shitty to you. Then they're going to feel unsafe and they're going to feel like, and then it starts to escalate and build on top of each other. And then at the end of the time, the day, not only have you built on the original offense, the original betrayal, or the original lie, or the original whatever, or mismanagement of your emotional state, but you also built on resentment, you know, other offenses that you do, and because you feel the lack of boundaries or respect or resentment, you start lashing out, and then they feel unsafe, and they start lashing out and protecting themselves, and then they build up walls, and you build up walls, and then you start to just kind of grow apart in your willingness to communicate and negotiate because you feel justified in the fact that they have wronged you in a particular way, where people can't really wrong us. Like in reality, you can't be wronged twice by the same person if you don't choose to. I'm not saying like don't allow other people to make mistakes and cut off all contact and you know, never be vulnerable. That's not what I'm saying. But you can be vulnerable and test somebody's ability to handle your emotional state. And if they do poorly with it, then take it back. And then you don't give it to them and don't give that power to them anymore because they're, you know, they've shown themselves unable to deal with it. Like if you had an employee, like a base level employee, like run your social media, right? We had this another company I was working at. These guys, they took over, they charged us a bunch of money, and then they said, okay, we're going to run your social media, we're going to grow your followers and everything. And they started slamming out content and buying like shout outs from major Instagram accounts and started building the content for that distribution channel. But the content that they were building was not anywhere in line with the mission of the company. Like it was standard, like crypto bro, like yeah, fucking hustle 24/7 and never miss a day in the gym, and you know the pictures of the guys wearing Rolex watches and like doing the lifestyle influencer thing, which probably this social media company was really good at, and had seen a lot of success at, but it didn't match the branding or the mentality of the psych aspect of the company. And so after a while, yeah, they were getting some followers or whatever, but the followers were never going to convert because our actual message was different than the social media content that they're producing. So after the first month, we reached out and we were like, hey, this is not what we do at all. Like, can you change it around? Here's, you know, list of our mission statement. Here's our values. Here's whatever. Like, you should have looked at this before, but here it is now. Can you change this up so that our content more matches the actual content from, you know, if they were to move further along with us in our company, that they would agree with that and not with this initial shit that you've been putting out. And they're like, yeah, no problem, sure. And then second month, same shit over and over again. A bunch of followers that weren't ever going to be customers because the message that was in the content was not anything close to what we actually thought. Month 3 comes around, they do the same thing after another conversation. We're like, look, we got to fire you, bro. Like this is just not working. Like you're not actually building a whole lot of followers for us, and the ones that you are building are never going to convert. They're never going to become customers. So why are we paying you thousands of dollars a month to create this lead generation mechanism that doesn't work, right? And so we parted ways, and that was fine, whatever. Like we had trusted a company to take our assets and blast them out over social media in hopes that we were going to get, you know, people who were going to follow us that would also be interested in our products. Like, you know, this is business. Let's do this. And then they didn't deliver, so we fired them, right? there's no hard feelings. Like, I don't hate the company, and there's no, I don't have any animosity. It's just like what happened was we trusted them with this thing, and they weren't good at that thing, so they stuck with their good at, and then they didn't serve us well, right? In the same way, if you ran your relationship more like a business, and you're like, okay, what is the return I'm getting on the investment that I'm putting out here? Here's my emotional vulnerability about this particular subject. I want to put it in your hands. Oh yes, I'll handle it just fine. And then they don't handle it just fine. After a couple of chances, you just gotta like fire them as the managers of that particular emotion. Like, it's your emotions. So why are you giving it to people who are unqualified or unable to perform the task that's necessary with that emotional resource? It's just good sense to allow people to be good at what they're good at, and not overwhelm them with shit that they're not qualified for. Your emotional state and your behaviors and everything that comes out after that is really up to you, and you can delegate. If you have a partner that is particularly good at supporting you, and you want them to support you, so you ask them to fulfill that role, and then you guys agree on what that means, then sure, then let them pull their weight in that space and live up to the expectations that you've both agreed on. But you can't just categorically keep assigning tasks in one particular vein, or like one area, to somebody who cannot handle the tasks in that area, and then expect your relationship to be good after the fact. Like, if they fail, that's on them, sure. But if you assign it to them a second time without them asking for it, and you expect them to rise to the occasion and handle this part of your emotional state that they had no business handling in the first place, I don't know, whatever their personal trauma is, or they don't have any experience with it or whatever, and they're not willing to fucking deal with it, then why do you keep expecting them to do well with it? Like, they're not qualified. So then you continue to put the ability to blame them out there, which will erode the trust, the respect of the relationship, and eventually lead to resentment and anger and defensiveness and feelings of unsafety and unsafe feelings. Like, all of that stuff just kind of gets muddled up into the whole scheme of things, and you're unable to create a resolution out of that, because now not only are they shitty at managing your emotional state, you blame them for that, which means you removed your responsibility in that space, and then now you resent them for that, which makes them unwilling to do other stuff that they might have been good at, and it starts to erode the whole relationship, and everything falls around you. There's a time where there are some things that, because of your lack of experience, you don't know how to deal with things. Both of you don't know how to deal with stuff, and you guys gotta learn how to learn about yourself and bring more self-awareness into the space before you start willy-nilly fucking running around blaming everybody for your lack of good feels, right? While it's a good expectation that your partner's not going to go around trying to hurt you intentionally, sometimes the way that they respond to trauma, sometimes the way that they haven't healed their inner child, sometimes the way that they lash out and whatever in relationships because of their unresolved issues, is going to hurt you, and that, and vice versa. There are ways that you haven't dealt with your shit, and then you get triggered by something they do, and then you're going to hurt them and make them feel unsafe at the very least. Well, that's on you. Like, whatever you can fix. And you can't just constantly kick the can down the road, it'll resolve itself later, or it's their fault to resolve. Otherwise, you're just gonna be stuck in this cycle over and over again of blaming feeling justified and vindicated, blaming again, feeling justified and vindicated, blaming again. And you start stealing your position down. You're like now you truly believe what a horrible lover they are, or a horrible they can't meet your needs or whatever. And you start to resent them because now they're the ones who are supposed to, but they can't, but they won't, or and then they're doing the same thing to you. The relationship just falls apart, and there's it's one thing when you're in your early 20s and you're just trying to figure yourself out, and there's nothing on the line except for the incredible feelings that are in the relationship. And it's quite yet another thing when you're married, you got kids, and now there's a whole lot of stakes involved. The resentment gets even harder, the anger gets even harder, the fucking rage gets even harder, because there's so much meaning attached to the whole situation. So that's one thing. The first thing is that your behavior and your emotions are really your responsibility. And when you delegate that to somebody else who's unqualified, and you don't give them a manual on how to deal with it, you can't expect them to win. And when they don't win, if you don't take it back for yourself and hold responsibility in that space, then all you're going to do is resent them, and your relationship's going to fall apart. Secondly, when it comes to roles, I get a lot of questions. I used to get questions from like the Huffington people and Vice and all these people who would interview me when I was working for a larger team. They'd be like, oh yeah, well, men and masculinity and women and femininity and submissiveness and all these roles and gender roles were challenging. Okay, yeah, great. But I don't care what you think traditional should be, shouldn't be. I do care that when you choose a role, that you define it well with your partner, and then try to keep the promises that you made when you made that definition. Like, I don't necessarily think that men should be leaders and women should be supporters necessarily. However, there are many women that I've dated, there are many women in my coaching sphere of influence that would rather be the supporter than the leader, as long as they could trust the competence of the leadership in the man that they're dating. I don't really care what should or shouldn't be as far as like gender roles, right? However, if you want to be a leader and you want your partner to be a supporter, and you like the polarity of that dynamic because it creates a lot of attraction and a lot of safety in knowing that partner is going to pull their weight and do their role, then what you need to do is trust your partner to do that role. And when it's not being fulfilled in your estimation, then you speak up about it, negotiate it, and figure out whether or not they're willing to do the work to meet your expectations, or you can drop your expectations to something that they can provide better. And same thing vice versa. Like when I started dating my primary partner, she loved to be the leader in social situations. She loved to be the leader in at work, but she did not want to be the leader of our relationship. She wanted me to make decisions. She wanted me to not to take on the hard problems and to take in all the data and then make a decision based on that. She wanted me to basically tell her where she would be in a decision hierarchy. She also wanted to be able to support, and she wanted to offer her opinion because she's relatively intelligent. So why wouldn't I listen to her opinion? But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the decisions I'm making. So in the beginning of our relationship, we negotiated this polarity dynamic. She said she's going to be much more attracted to me if I was going to take charge, make decisions, and move forward with things, whether or not I have opposition. Okay, so to be decisive is an attractive trait to her. She wants me to do that. Okay, so I agree. I'm going to fulfill this role. And then she had to agree to, when I make a decision, to stand behind me on it and support me as I move forward. And various times throughout our relationship, she would try to take the leadership stuff from me because she felt like I wasn't doing it right, and then do it on her own. And that wasn't gonna fly, because not because I have some sort of weird domineering thought process, but we had agreed that I'm the guy who does that. So you need to live up to your agreements, or we need to renegotiate how this is working and what field that works. And so in some fields, in our relationship, in some states, she decided that she wanted to take leadership and control, and she didn't like the way that I did things. And so we agreed that she would take those and I would take these. And as long as we continue to renegotiate that stuff whenever there's an issue, we constantly have a good balance of role development, because we're living up to the promises that we made each other when we decided to accept these particular roles. There are many decisions that I would make that I didn't feel support after the fact. I felt resentment. I felt combat. I felt not just unsupported, but like, diametrically opposed. And it's not her job to do that based on what she had agreed to do. And so we have to go back and renegotiate. I'm like, okay, well, I feel kind of out in the wind when you asked me to make this decision, then I made this decision, and you didn't give me any opposition in the beginning, and now you're just undercutting me after the fact. That's not the roles that we agreed on. So can we renegotiate here so that we don't have this happen in the future? I have no problems making mistakes and screwing up every once in a while, but systematically we need to be able to trust each other to do what we promised each other we were going to do, and we got to work on that every day to move in that direction. Otherwise, why did we agree on the rules in the first place? Right? So when you set up expectations, it's very important, especially in the beginning of a relationship, and as needed as it goes through, it's very important that the expectations that you set are agreed on by both parties. If you don't have that agreement, then you're expecting them to live up to that agreement is akin to what I was talking about in the first point. It's setting up a recipe for failure, because they're not qualified to handle that thing, and they have not agreed to handle that thing. So hold them responsible for holding that agreement when they haven't agreed just causes strife and trauma and problems and misunderstandings and failed expectations and disappointment and betrayal, right? You're going to feel betrayed by somebody who you expect to do a particular thing in a particular way, but they haven't agreed to do it that way. So you can't hold them accountable for it. And so as far as boundaries are concerned, it's very difficult to enforce boundaries that aren't agreed on by both parties. If, like, there's an analogy of like the fence, right? If you come up to the edge of my property and there's a fence and there's a sign on the fence that says, don't hop over the fence, you'll be shot. Right? Invaders will be shot, right? And then you hop over my fence and then I shoot you. You had a reasonable expectation that I was going to shoot at you because the sign was there, it was on the fence. But if I have no fence, and I don't know, and I could just kind of have an idea of where the boundary line is, and you don't know where the boundary line is, and then you come over, then I shoot you, is that my fault or your fault? Well, it's definitely an enforced boundary that wasn't clear. And so the important point with boundaries is that they have to be clear. You're like, here's where the line is, here's where all of these things make you feel badly and make me not want to fucking trust you to be in my territory. Also, there's the line's clearly demarked, and then here's also the consequences of crossing this barrier, so that you're in full knowledge that when you choose to hop over the fence and do what you're not supposed to do, that here's the consequence that happened. You can grade this in a number of different ways. Like the analogy kind of breaks down when it comes to punishment and consequences, because in general, the only real power that you have in a relationship is to be absent. Like you can gaslight and manipulate and use fear tactics and whatever, but most of those things are not healthy in the way that they don't work the same way time after time after time after time. Like, I'm not going to go into some crazy moral thing about how you should never yell at each other, or you should never have disagreements that are anger fueled or whatever, like that, fine, do that stuff. But most of the passive aggressive ways, or the directly aggressive ways that we communicate, trying to control or manipulate another human being to do what we want them to do, it might work for the first few times, but it's going to erode the trust and safety of the relationship. And at the end of the thing, you either have somebody who's a beaten down, abused slave to all of your desires and needs, and vice versa, because they're going to manipulate you in other ways. It's not a very functional relationship at the end of it, because those tactics are very short term. Like, if I'm going to go scream at somebody and point my finger in their face and yell at them and do a direct control technique where I'm like, you better back the fuck down, and like get all crazy, that's going to happen once with, the guy in the bar that's a little drunk and needs to have some sense knocked into him. But the second time I do that to this guy, he's going to see this pattern, and then he's going to figure out ways around it, and it's going to build resentment. There's going to be no cohesion. There's not going to be no agreement. There's not going to be no good negotiation. We're not going to see each other's humanity. In the same way, I'm not saying like don't yell at your girlfriend or whatever, but generally it's not going to help the relationship grow. It's going to erode it and give you a lot of drama and dumbness that you don't want to have to deal with, really. So the only real power that you have in a relationship that isn't going to fucking take the relationship out of its knees at some point is to not be there anymore. It's to exit yourself from the situation, and so you don't flare up and do something stupid, and then come back together when you're both calmer and not so caught up in the heat of the moment. And so I was talking to the second guy today, and he was talking about how it's important to take a break, to do a timeout, right, from the anger management side of things. And there are some anxiously attached styles that are going to be like, okay, well, if he leaves, then it's going to be it's like abandonment, and if we don't resolve this here right now, then it's not going to get resolved, and so he needs to stay in, and argue it out with me. But like, if you agree in the beginning, it's like, okay, there are going to be some times where I'm overwhelmed emotionally and I'm not going to be thinking straight with my head. So if I get to this point where I feel like I'm going to lose control of myself, I'm going to take a time out, I'm going to cool down, and then I'm going to come back. I promise I'll be back, and we're going to negotiate this. That is going to be a lot more effective in managing a relationship than any sort of manipulation or coercion that you're going to do. And there was on a further to the point of not being there is really your only power. Is I had a relationship where she was, I wouldn't call her an alcoholic. I think she just used alcohol to escape a lot of the stuff that she was dealing with in her head. But whenever she drank, especially hard alcohol, she would become violent. She would start throwing things or, lashing out physically. And, I'm a 230-pound dude, and I can handle myself and not get injured when those things are happening. But why should I have to put up with physical abuse and then have you, abuse cycle, apologize for it later, and then just do it again and again and again? Like, I keep giving that to you. Like, no. So rather than saying, you can't drink, or you don't do, you don't lash out like that, when I'm around, or else, or whatever. Like, none of that. I just said, look, here's the rule. I don't want to deal with physical abuse anymore. So if you ever choose to drink hard alcohol, you, me, and hard alcohol are never going to be in the same place. So feel free to do what you want. You choose that. But if you ever start this while I'm around, I'm going to leave. And I don't disrespect. I don't have any, it's not vindictive or rude. I can't be around that anymore. These are my boundaries. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do in the moment. I'm just gonna make my exit, and I'll be done I mean, I'll be gone until you're done with this, because we, all three of us, you, me, and Hard Alcohol, can't hang out together. And she agreed with that. And from that point of agreement, she's been able to maintain her behavior, because she no longer gets hammered and lashes out at me. And then on the flip side, I was usually the only one she would lash out on at that point, when she was at that point. So when she does drink with friends or whatever, like, she doesn't lose control of it, because at some point earlier in the relationship, I had somehow enabled that behavior, and then by setting a boundary, backed up with the consequence of me not being present, which is really the only power I had, that effectively curbed the behavior in an abuse sense. Now, I find those types of negotiations to be a win, because we're able to continue to operate without feeling restricted, without feeling held down or tied up by our partner's ideas that we may or may not agree with. Like, I'm able to set a boundary and be like, look, if you do this, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore. Like, I do this a lot, actually, with social media. Some of my friends will send me, like, things that I don't want to see on a regular basis, right? Like memes that don't apply to me, or, you know, they're trying to get some sort of attention that just, it doesn't provide me any value. And so I'll tell them, like, I did this to my mom too. I was like, look, if you continue to send me this stuff, I'm gonna block you. Feel free to send whatever you want to send, but I'm not gonna interact or engage with this stuff. My mom especially, I did this because I have a lot of, like, religious trauma. Like, there's a lot of blame and guilt and stuff coming up from my childhood, because the religion had this hold on our family, and she continues to believe this stuff, and I kind of cast it aside for what it was. But her idea of religious outreach to me is to send me these comics and memes and things that all have to do with, like, shaming non-religious behavior. And I was like, look, Mom, like, you gotta stop this stuff. And I'm not telling you what to do, but, like, if you continue to send me this shit, I'm gonna block you, and you're not gonna be able to send me anything. And then that's it, right? And she, you know, was good for a second and a half, and then, you know, got herself blocked. And then she did it on every social media platform after the fact. She was just she couldn't resist the urge to try to, like, insert her ideology and dogma into my life. And so I just broke off and stopped. I was absent from it. And you know, when I see her in person, like, we, you know, we'll communicate like humans, but I'm not going to let you try to poison drip me with your ideology. And she, you know, was really hurt by that. And I go, like, well, I don't shove all of my ideologies down your throat, so stop. You know, like, it is what it is. And before that, you know, as a backup to my original point, before I had told her, like, I'm just going to be absent from this stuff if you continue to do this, I would just resent her every single time she sent something. I was like, look, you know, I hate this shit. You know, well, you know, I feel justified. All this back and forth. And I was just like, why don't you respect me? It's just like fucking created resentment, right? And while it might create some pain for her that I don't do what the fuck she wants me to do, that's basically where it stops. Like, I don't have an issue with, like, just, I'm done with interacting with this type of material, this type of content. Same thing happens when, like, guys around me are racist. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that anymore. It's like, oh yeah, what are we? Your ideas don't stimulate me at all. It's not a big draw to hang out with you, because basically you embarrass me when you're around. So I just don't choose to hang out with you around other people that I want to keep their esteem. Like, well, that's really fucked up. You know, I'm just joking. I'm like, yeah, well, you can just joke somewhere else. And that is being able to kind of control access in that way is really the only thing I can do without trying to, exert coercion or influence over somebody that's going to make the balance of the relationship go so far off that there's not going to be any mutual respect there. So, yeah, I think I've exhausted what I was going to say about that. Number one, your behavior and your emotion is in your control. And if it's not in your control and you're dealing with triggers and trauma or whatever, it's in your responsibility to resolve that. It's not laying it on somebody else to do that, especially when they're not qualified, is only going to lead to more pain, drama, and chaos. Number two, boundaries are something that's agreed on by both parties. Otherwise, it's dumb to enforce them, because having expectations of somebody else doesn't mean that they're going to abide by the rules of the expectations that you have, especially if you don't communicate them. So the boundaries should be clear, and they should be agreed on by both parties before they're enforced. You should be able to see the sign on the fence and agree with the fact that that's what's going to happen before you hop the fence and make the choice, right? And three, the only non-coercive, unbalanced way to deal with most of your relationships is choosing not to be there anymore, or choosing to be absent while the offense is taking place. Not trying to control somebody else's behavior, because when you do that, even if you're successful at it, you erode the mutual respect in the relationship that would maintain the balance so that you can carry that relationship on into longevity. So those are the 3 points I want to talk to you today about anger and relationship management. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, stay awesome.